pray. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for men and women who are willing to give of their time, their talents, and for our city. We thank you for the city of Mitchell and all these efforts that are daily put into the governing and overseeing of the city. And I pray for your blessing upon the business that is to happen here tonight, and that in all of our hearts that would be in agreements with you, and that you would bring unity and peace in each one of our lives. In Jesus' name we ask. Amen. Amen. Yeah, thank you.
Before we begin our regular session, we're going to do the work session, which is a discussion on the naming and sponsorship policy. So we'll start with that, and then we'll do that for 30 minutes, and then we'll move on to our regular council session.
And you as council might not need 30 minutes to discuss this. We did just list that we'll start the regular meeting as soon as you're done. The mayor and I met with Mr. Dosher and Mr. Rice last, I don't know, Thursday, Wednesday, something like that. It was last week to discuss what they kind of wanted to see in a naming policy. What they requested that we do is bring just this is a pretty rough draft format to you as council to discuss. They had me add, after their discussions, the three of them, a couple points on here for you to consider as council. And they said any other comments that you guys might have, and then we can put something together to bring back as a resolution at the next council meeting. But this is really just to take feedback from you. There's going to be some, style errors and that kind of stuff that we will correct. And Justin's also reviewing it for legal review, but we want to make sure that what you as a council would like to see is included. I guess I could walk through it if you'd like me to quick. We looked at several different samples that came from either the ICMA organization that I belong to, as well as other cities that they had passed. We had a meeting with departments, and then John and Steve and the mayor and myself, and we reviewed what currently departments were doing, what we thought were good about some of the policies, what we wanted to make sure that were included. One of the items was having a list or an inventory of all the things that are currently named or sponsored, as well as what other opportunities might.
Do we have that?
I have that. I don't think I distributed that out, but I would do that before the next meeting. There was still some additional items that people were adding on to that. Another discussion was that it's impossible for us to pass a city policy that would cover every instance in every department, because every department does different things. And so it makes sense that each department should pass a departmental policy that's compliant or that follows this general city policy that's had legal review on their departmental board, and then the council have signed off on. Park and Rec has already done that, and for the most part, their policy then would just fit within this existing city policy. You'd have to review to make sure it makes sense. I'm trying to think of some of the other things we talked about in our large group. Really, there was everything from how to name streets and advertising and everything else to naming buildings and amenities. We kind of focused in on first outlining what the process would be, requiring departments to pass policies that would also be compliant or reviewed by council and approved, and then just give some general procedures about when this would happen. Couple things in here. This one policy that we used as the baseline basically separated it into a couple different kinds of naming. First of all, if you're going to build a new park, you're going to name it at that point. That would be covered under that first one, just naming policy. But then they have honorific naming. They also had memorial naming. Honorific would be naming a amenity or a building or a park after someone in honor of them. A memorial would be someone that had passed away. And then the last one would be naming rights. So let's say we were just similar to what we did with the Pepsi slide at the pool, the indoor pool. So let's say you wanted to name the Corn Palace Plaza the Jeff Smith Plaza, and how much would that take to buy those naming rights? I just threw one out there. Yep. A couple things that we left up for discussion is do you want to have a timeline where everything would sunset? You know, do you want to have 15 years, 10 years? Do you want it to be until the council chooses to change it?
Tell us what other communities have done.
Microphone, please.
Can you tell us what some of the other communities have done in that? Do they have it sunset
We-
typically?
What we saw typically was 10 or 15 years is what I saw in the samples, but some of them said permanent unless changed by the council too. So really that's going to be something for you to consider. Steve's point was you may end up doing a naming after a business that then goes away 20 years later, and does it make sense to still have that business name tied to a facility that's no longer in existence in the community? The other discussion that we had quite a bit of discussion about last week that John and Steve and the mayor thought it would be a good item for council to consider is with the naming rights where we're going to sell that right to an individual or a business. Do you want to give departments the ability to name amenities, or do you want everything that's being sold for a dollar amount to come to council? So there's an alternate there in number 5. You know, the first one would just say anything that's going to be named for that under this category is going to end up at council for approval. That alternate would be if you want to give, I guess one of the examples was less than 5 years and under, I think it was under $10,000, wasn't it, Mayor, in total revenue, that they could do it within their department. But then Steve's comment was, well, then will you see everything being named for $9,999 for 4.8 years? So don't know if that makes sense for it to be in there or not. The other item that we discussed is that this really could be outlined in the departmental policy. So for example, if, oh geez, I'm really not going to come
I
up
believe
with
when
it.
we had the naming rights for the Pepsi soccer complex from the Norby family, it was 200 or 240,000 for 20 years, I believe.
I don't remember. Do you remember, Nate?
In fact, I know it was because I was the one that went on that.
Yeah, it was 200,000, and it wasn't for, the naming rights were in perpetuity until another donation of 200,000 came in.
Yeah, in case their competitor wanted to match that. That's what that was for.
So it's really just going to be a council decision if you want to have criteria or limits established in that policy. And then the one that we spent time discussing as well is, that was a pretty good comment. You know, you could require that there's no religious symbols, but then they said, what if a Vera came in and wanted to sponsor something? Could they use just the text and not a symbol in their logo? There was also, I believe it was another one in here that said we weren't going to do any that included like guns or alcohol or those kind of things. And the discussion last week was it was probably best just to leave it either in 9 or 10 that you have discretion, because Boyd's, you know, Gunstock, maybe they wanted to sponsor something, or Porter's Distributing, and, you know, it wouldn't necessarily be promoting, you know, alcohol or firearms, but it's an important part of the community as well. So ultimately, they gave me direction to take those out and just leave it that you have the right to turn it down if you thought it was going to be negative on the city's reputation. So
I was curious, can you go back to that? About why, what the reasoning, go back just up a little bit further.
this one?
Recognize birth, marriage, or anniversary of specific individuals. Tell me about that.
I have no idea. That was actually in just the sample policy and no one took it out. So,
That makes no sense to me.
They'll use that for when they plant trees.
Oh.
Someone's born to recognize.
And we're disallowing that?
I don't know.
yep, that would exclude it. So you could definitely take it out. This is just a starting point to get you guys discussing what you want to see in there. And actually, that one was not discussed last week, that item. I think,
Would that be the same thing if you wanted a bench? There's parks that have their bench with their logo or their naming or donated by. Would that be the same thing?
what do you mean, if they're doing it in
Well, they're putting it in
recognition
the
of a
park and they
birth
want
or
their-
a,
They're buying a black granite bench, like the ones that
Yeah.
are there for $1,500 or $2,000 at the Veterans Park, and they got their name on it. Is that just for 10 years, or is that forever for that item?
that would be under the Park and Recs policy. Are they forever? If they're doing a bench donation?
For the life of the bench.
Is that the same thing the golf course too, Kevin? So you have benches out there at the golf course?
And you can strike any part of this out that you don't like. Actually, I'm surprised we didn't discuss that one.
And I guess I'll just give you my 2 cents on it, is that you've got criteria listed under both the honorific and the memorial donations of certain things that you can, certain contributions to the community that they've got to give or meet. And to me, it just seems kind of, I don't know, circumventing those criteria if you can just put a bench out there or something to honor a birth, marriage, or anniversary. And that's just me playing devil's advocate here. I'm not for or against that being in there. I'm just trying to give you some rationale for why that could be.
I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about, and I'm confused because birth, marriage, anniversary, not death. So I'm thinking of, we have benches that memorialize someone who's passed away that the family has donated. But I don't know why we wouldn't want to, the tree is a perfect example. If someone said, I want to plant a tree in honor of the birth of my daughter, and they're giving us a tree or something, I don't know if it came through.
Well, again, you can take out any portion you don't want. It's just a sample to get you guys discussing where you want to go with your citywide policy.
That was one that I was really like, I don't.
I guess my preference would be that all of these decisions would come to the council because they're going to anyway. Somebody decides to have the Hitler Pavilion and, the Hitler family farm south of town, and that's who we mean, but it's just like the symbol in the Corn Palace. You get the tourists who think we're a Nazi haven because we've got this quote-unquote swastika in the 1907 Corn Palace. So I guess I would prefer that, I understand this is a draft document, but that these decisions come to the council, because if since we're talking about the park board, if the park board quote-unquote makes a mistake, it comes here anyway.
And ultimately, we are the ones who, when you say it comes back to us, whether formally or informally, we are the ones who end up taking the call. So.
And Steve, I may have spoke a little bit about our meeting last week, so if you want to give your comments on this as well, feel free. But
Keep going. Gotta get caught up here.
I had somebody from the Baseball Association to contact me last year, or just the other day. Obviously, a couple years ago, we authorized them to build their indoor facility, practice facility over there by corner of 15th and the bypass, which it sounds like it's actually going to move forward this summer, finally, because we gave them sort of a 2-year window, and now the 2-year window's up, and they are planning on, can't speak for them, but it's my understanding they are planning on digging and building that this summer. His question just was, obviously none of this is in place yet. He just wants to make sure that whatever we choose to, that it doesn't affect possibly what they may be wanting to do for their naming rights on their building too, And I don't remember what we even gave them for latitude last
And that's
2
not
years
our
ago. I can't
facility,
remember from
is
our
it?
conversations if they were going to call it the Mitchell Baseball Association facility or what, but they just were concerned that we got, don't forget about them.
Right. It's been quite a while since I looked at that lease that we came up with on that, but anything that we do here wouldn't be able to supersede what was in that lease. So, we'd go back to whatever the provisions were there.
Yeah, and that's what he asked
And
me,
wasn't that
grandfathered
gonna-
in, and I just couldn't remember what our discussion was. And I said if we said something that night and approved it, I would think we'd be grandfathered in, but I don't
Right.
remember
Is
what
that-
it was.
And was that going to be a city facility, or were they going to own it? I thought we were just doing it on a lease site.
I
don't
guess
remember.
technically we leased them the land,
Oh, okay.
and they're going to build the building. It's going to end up being a city building when they're out of it.
Right.
Correct. Yep.
I guess I'd say 2 other things about this. One is, I like whatever we choose for a timeline. I think we should choose a timeline. For example, when the mayor reads, X da-da-da-da-da of the Lawler edition, well, who is Lawler anymore? So I like the idea of a timeline, and of course the council could decide to renew it, whenever it was. And then the other thing, if we pick a dollar amount, I think we need to have an idea that we're going to revisit that so often. I love the old Perry Mason. The only thing that dates it really is its attitude towards women and the amount of money. So-and-so was kidnapped and the ransom is $5,000 and people, you know, it's a terrible amount. So I guess I would like to have in here somewhere that
Maybe that could be
there's
also.
a mandatory review every so many years to.
Maybe the
to look.
departmental policies would have to be readopted on a scheduled time frame because within that departmental policy, they'll have their listing of opportunities available for sponsorship. Because we won't have a list of all the dollar amounts in this one, but that might be, it forces us to all go back through it and make sure that the value we have assigned to it makes sense too.
There are decisions that we've made that make perfect sense, and 15 years from now, people are going to wonder what in the world we were thinking. And I think the same thing will be true of some of these provisions that look fine now. But maybe a decade from now, people go, wow, what is that?
And just my take on the time limit part of that, Mel, is it's a lot easier to put a time limit on something and then leave a name in place than it is to have it supposedly be permanent and then try to take it away. So
Is that what the Park and Rec has now, a time limit? Say if someone wants to do 100,000, do you have a time limit, Nathan, or what did you guys come up with there?
Yeah, I don't know if I have that.
If you invested more than 50% of the project total, it'd be the life of the project. So
So,
it wasn't on a time limit.
but if the council sets a time limit, what you would need to do, then it wouldn't apply to anything in place, but any future requests are going to comply with what that new policy is, because all the departmental policies would have to become compliant with your city policy. And we now have an inventory, except for all the trees. We don't have all those inventoried yet, but we do have quite a big list of everything that's been sponsored or named to date.
When we put the second sheet together and we were out raising money, this was before we put the Park and Rec naming rights in place, but we did have where the locker rooms, the concession, the actual building, the two buildings themselves, we had actual years that was associated with that. So we'll have to let that run out, but then there is at least out there, and I think you've got the same thing happening on the soccer too. So there was a time. So even if there's some that was grandfathered in, there is some out there that already have the time.
Sure.
Well, and that gets back to my monetary thing, because we, you know, I can remember talking with my mother this weekend about being with my dad buying a new car back in the 70s, and it was $2,300, and how in the world are we going to afford $2,300, you know? And so putting a time limit on allows a future council another money-making opportunity, and also then you don't get that situation where, gosh, they sponsored, you know, the soccer field for $200,000, and what's $200,000 today, you know, 30 years from now. So,
Well, another example, I don't know, the Randall Gym inside Park and Rec building. I don't know when they labeled that the Randall Gym, but I know it was one long time ago. And obviously that still is there. I don't know what rules apply with that.
Actually, Nate found some information on that one.
Because I was going to say, if is that forever, or is it, you know, with the new remodeling coming up, can it be renamed? I'm not trying to, you know, take anything away from the Randall family. They're an excellent family, and I'm glad they're part of our town, but that thing has been named the Randall Gym for, I can't tell you. You know, obviously.
If I may interject, something that you might want to consider in this is theft, vandalism, or storms. A few years ago, we had a bench in the cemetery that somebody put in. It was an expensive one. A tree branch fell on it and broke it, and they expected us to replace it. It's kind of can create if somebody vandalizes it, you know, whose budget is it going to come out of if it's an expensive item?
Is there any insurance, you know, umbrella insurance that would cover these things once they're the property of the city?
that's probably something we'd have to specifically ask our provider.
but even if there was, I mean, if it's like every other piece of insurance, you know, the
deductible
Veterans
versus-
Park is basically a year old, and you know how it works with cars. You drive them off the lot, and now they're worth half of what they were worth, you know, 15 feet ago. And so if you had a nice marble bench or something, I'm sure, again, if it was of any age, even if you had insurance, it wouldn't replace it.
And sometimes the deductibles are higher than what the value of the item is as well.
And that would be good to know in case
Yep.
you put that in policy. If there is vandalism, there's a deductible, and they should know upfront.
I'd like to add to that. Basically, for any equipment like that, the deductible is going to be about $5,000. So we could get a $1,000 deductible, but do you really want to pay a higher premium to get a lower deductible on things like that when the risk isn't very high?
We don't have that much vandalism anyway, do we? Have we had a lot of claims, Billy? In the past?
No, we don't. Not that gets turned into insurance anyway. Usually when there's vandalism, the police department works with the department head and they find out if they can find out who it is. And then when that person goes to court, they pay the city back. They reimburse the city for the cost of the tree or the bench or whatever it was that was ruined.
Thank you.
Nathan, I think you were going to answer before. What did you find out about the Randall gym? Did you say you found some information about it?
Yeah, there's no end date on that, so, yeah. And we do have in our donor guidelines that the Parks Board would set the duration, would set a time limit on it, depending on the circumstance, so.
But wasn't that one named before it was transferred to
That
the
one was,
city?
yeah, that one has
Yeah.
no end date.
It was before we even had the rec centers.
You know, Nathan brings up a good point. Is there any coordination between the other departments and our policy? I mean,
That's where you're going to have, it requires that the council approve any departmental policy so that you're ensuring that you're getting some consistency amongst departments as well. So there may be some tweaking that has to happen with Park and Rec as you move forward. If you want to limit everything to 10 years and renewable after that, then they would have to modify their sponsorship policy to match that.
yeah, and I would want to make clear whatever agreements they had entered into prior.
Right.
We would honor, obviously. I mean, if they had and I don't know that they have one, but if they had a 50-year agreement, we'd stick with the 50-year agreement, and then when 50 years was up, we'd start over.
The question, or the area where you're going to have more problems is if there was some kind of like the Randall Gym is probably a perfect example. You had somebody make the donation, but a term wasn't specified at that time. So the question then is it permanent or can it, kind of be changed at will? So
Is there anything?
I would kind of argue that if there wasn't something explicitly set, then the duration is whatever we choose it to be.
This is for you, Nathan. Is there anything on the new indoor pool, time limit or anything there?
Just the Pepsi slide that was a 12-year. It was 10 years from when all of our agreements ended. So it's a 10-year from that point, so.
That's the only thing in the building.
Yeah, but there's no naming, we're not under any obligation on any naming in that facility. Except for the swim club has naming rights that they can name a pool, and they can also put up some signage for some donations. And that was given to them at some point along the way. So,
Is that for what, 10 years or?
no, I think they gave that to them permanently, as far as I know.
I don't remember timelines being discussed. We might want to make.
Yeah, there was no,
yeah.
again, a lot of this has no end, no time, like Justin was saying.
One more, Nathan. I know the softball complex has fields named after different people out there. Is there a time limit on those, do you know? Like, I know Jocko's got one named after his mom and dad. Buzz Smith has one named after him.
None of them had end dates that I can remember.
There is time limits on the the soccer fields. There's
Oh,
fields
yep,
out there
that
that
one,
were-
you're correct, that was 20 years, I believe.
20 years, same as the naming rights for each field, the 9 fields.
One of the things that I looked at in here was the memorial naming as far as individual needs to be deceased. And the question is, does it have to be at a certain period of time before? And I don't know what you guys think, but I don't think we're the Hall of Fame, that you have to be inducted after whatever the 5 years or whatever it is. I would say if an individual is worthy of it, doesn't matter how long they've been deceased, but I don't know what you guys think.
Well, a good example is Bella's Park.
Is what?
Bellas Park, would we 5 years after the event have the same feeling and urgency and same ability to raise money and that kind of thing? So, yeah.
Yeah.
One concern kind of along those, and I haven't had a chance to discuss my comments with Stephanie, so she's hearing these at the same time everybody else is here, but one thing I identified was right now it's broken up into honorific and memorial naming, but really the criteria under both are pretty much the same, except you're talking about a living or a deceased individual. So there's a question of whether do you really need two different categories with that when the criteria is the same under both anyway, because if you distinguish them, but then you put a time limit or something like that along with the deceased category, you could have a situation where somebody's, meets all the criteria for the honorific one, but they pass away, but you've got a 5-year limit before you can do a memorial naming. So you can't name it after them for another 5 years. So.
And again, that's just a sample policy. You can combine those into one if you want.
Well, my question, Justin, that you raised in my mind is, okay, so let's say the honorific is 10 years and the person dies in year 4. It's not an honorific anymore. Do you pull the name? It seems silly, but.
Yeah.
And actually, I do remember there was a difference. In the memorial naming on the original policy we looked at, that was forever. But we decided to take that out. That was the difference in the policy that we took this from. In the honorific, there was a timeline established. In the memorial, it was a permanent. So if you're taking that permanency out of there anyways, it's probably the same thing. But that was the difference between the two in the original policy we looked at.
And again, I understand we're just discussing it, but criteria for honorific naming, the first criteria is you got to be living.
Well, then you just take that out.
And that seems a little petty. We're recognizing somebody for great achievement, and the second they die, you go, no, not anymore.
What if you just say individual must be living at the time of naming?
So
Or you just go to the one.
in my
Or
working
one
notes,
category.
yeah, in my working notes, that's what I added that language in, that it's at the time the request is made. So if you wanted to keep them separate categories, that was going to be the language.
I really don't think you probably need to, because when we looked at this, the only thing that was different was in the memorial naming. The policy we originally looked at, it was a permanent thing. Right, but then we changed it. Yep, but we took that out so that you as a council could decide what you wanted for the period of time. So it makes sense to me that you just combine the two and eliminate the
Put them
confusion.
both together.
Yeah.
Just to update,
Got less to look at.
Yep.
two of the baseball fields do have a time limit, and the language they used was no less than 25 years on 2 of the fields. No less than 20. So you could continue going after that, or you could stop it.
And I will send this list out to council after tonight. I probably should have sent that out before today. This is the full list that the departments have reviewed. Here's your question on the Randall Gym. It was built in the 1970s. It was when the YMCA did it, so they don't know the actual amounts of the donation because it wasn't one of its city property. So staff are still updating this with more information as we gain it. It's the first time we've tried to put together a comprehensive list like this, but that would be helpful for you as council to see that, they've identified whether it's a potential or if it's one that's committed through a certain time frame as well. And actually the James Valley Community Center has a ton, because they have they have benches, chairs, all kinds of things that are listed too. So.
And that Randall Gym would be an illustration of what I'm talking about. I don't know what they gave at the time, but I'm sure it was a substantial amount of money for the time. But now you say, well, you got 60 years for X amount of dollars.
Policy shorter too, to combine the two together, which would be good too.
I think it'd make it a lot easier to read, having one instead of two.
One thing I didn't mention earlier too is, and John had me add this in, that under Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I have to make this bigger, I'm blind or old. On the revenue, that any revenue, if it's a project that you're doing, like with the example of the indoor pool, obviously the Pepsi money is going towards the slide, so it goes into the construction account. But let's say it was generated for a purpose that we've already spent the money to do that facility, and now we're naming it later, that the revenue that's, or the fund that's generating the amenity or the thing that it's available for sponsorship, that's where the revenue should go back to. So even though maybe one of the baseball fields comes up and it's available for sponsorship again, that revenue stays with the fund that it was generated by. So we don't just put it in general fund. People know it's going to support the parks or support Corn Palace or whatever is the fund that generated the object or the building or the park or the amenity. Yeah. And we added that under each of the revenue categories, that it either goes towards any revenue generated above project costs will remain within the fund, the fund revenue where the naming request for the land or other improvement occurred. So no matter how it's being done, if you're renaming something, if there's any revenue tied to it, it stays with the fund that where the building or the sponsorship opportunity is at.
So tell me this, we got the Veterans Park, and I believe there's between $55,000 and $60,000 roughly that's left that we oversold, which is a good problem. So that will go into this, or will that be in a different fund that we can only spend anything that's involved in that park out of that fund, or will we have to do a resolution later to find out what the total money is so that
when you get done with that project, I think we need to look at, I've been maintaining that budget as we've went.
Right.
So when you find out what that total is, what we can do is Michelle can you can as council take action to earmark that money for Veterans Park. And then every year as you budget an amount for the maintenance, upkeep or other upgrades that you do, then we would just take it directly out of those funds raised. I think you need to dedicate those funds to that park because that's what people contributed to.
when Lyndon gets back, I talked to him here a week ago, and when he gets back, and we'll have all the bills, we'll look it all over, then we'll bring it all up.
Yep.
And I think we talked about this at the Veterans Park committee meetings. And that's what they all agreed.
Yep.
We raised it for the veterans, let's keep it for the veterans.
And exactly what Justin just said, that's the intention of this too, that so people know when they're giving money towards a project or an item that it stays with that, what it was intended for.
Well, I appreciate everybody's time that they've put into this, because I know when Stephanie was gathering information, there was, 7 or 8 different policies, and they all had a little bit different version, and they all had some plus and minuses. So Steve, and I know John's gone, but Stephanie and whoever else, Justin, obviously, so appreciate you taking the time to do this, because we know that this was something we needed to do for many years, but we just haven't gotten around to doing it. And I guess, now the Munson thing kind of pushed us to start this process, and now I think we got a document that we can start working off of. So,
And I think what I'm hearing from you, we're gonna combine the 2 naming honorific memorial into one. We may want to address theft, vandalism, or destruction. We want to make sure there's a time frame tied to a required review of departmental policies, as well as the inventory list and the cost or sponsorships tied to that, the market review.
The inventory,
Yeah.
and I don't know, maybe that's annually or, at some time frame that we'd look at that to know what either's been added or dropped off.
And then you would like to not have that alternate provision, so anything that's doing naming permanently, or naming comes to the council. And then you want some type of a minimum or a cap on the year, whether you choose to renew it at that time you could, but I haven't heard if it's 10 years or 15 years, or do I just put 10 to 15 and let you guys decide when it comes back, or?
I think it still depends on how much money it is and what.
Yeah, what the donation is.
If someone came into the Corn Palace, I'll give you $1 million, I'm sure that.
Well, you could
We're gonna
also.
get more than 10
The numbers
years.
came from, because like of the 6 or 7 policies that we had, 3 or 4 of them had 10 and 15-year
Right.
examples in them. So that's That's where the numbers came from.
Your other option,
Wasn't any magic
Right.
number.
But if a big donor comes in,
Yeah, I don't know.
your other option could be that in that same place where you said it requires that the council pass by resolution with the majority of the board signing off on it, we could say in there, and you specify the length of that naming, but then you're having to do it for every single, everyone that comes in.
What if the policy said no less than 10 years? And then you could say, it's $1 million, we'll give you 40 or whatever. I mean, it's just a thought.
I was going to suggest kind of the opposite, is you set the ceiling, say, we know that we don't want anything longer than 15, or I guess the soccer fields, we did 20, but you set the ceiling, and then if you want to have the negotiations take place prior to the council approving it, then you'll know how long it's supposed to be, and it can be however long is appropriate up to that ceiling.
My only concern about that is that if there were someone who wanted to make a very large donation and make sure that their family would be remembered forevermore in the city of Mitchell, that they may say, well, gosh, if they're only going to name it this for 15 years, then, I don't think that it's really worth it.
I wonder if you could say not to exceed 20 years unless specified in the resolution by the council or something, because then at least then it's documented what it's doing and why.
Right.
Versus us having to try to find it later.
We
That's
have
what I
to,
was thinking, as long as it's specified, as long as there's that line that says otherwise specify the council. The biggest thing that we want to avoid is exactly what happened now is we have naming rights out there on
Right.
several different things, and there's no expiration date on any of them.
Right.
And obviously, like Mel was saying, back then it was a great idea. Well, things change, and what we're doing now in 15 years is probably not going to be a great idea either. But, but I think it's a great start to at least having some from out for every council down the road, 10 years, 15, 20 years. There is that little out for them to readjust or make it work for whatever that amount is.
Right. I think it's good. It's good for us to have that default defined because, in the past, we don't know what the default is. So,
and, I have to say that the older I get, 15 years isn't very long. I mean,
That's all I got
15
left.
years was just, no.
Means I got 2 years, huh?
So, I mean, I just want to make sure that we have some room to wiggle because, 15 years ago was.
right. So, if we're specifying it every time, that's probably okay. But if for some reason
Yes,
something
I like-
didn't get, if something fell through the cracks, we still want to have some kind of default to fall back on.
Well, and then the other thing too is that if you're in a position where you're seeking out a sponsorship where someone's going to pay for maybe from a business, you could say, our typical is 15, but if we could secure this kind of a sponsorship, we will request the council to go to, at this year, at 15 years, we'll do this level, but if they agree to 30 years, we'll go at this level, or, it might give someone a little room for negotiations too in that situation.
And this may be unique to me, but the worst thing you can do as a teacher is show favorites. So I don't want us to get in the situation where somebody comes in and says, well, gosh, so-and-so got 8 years, and now you're giving so-and-so 12 years, and what's the difference between the two? Which is why I like the minimum going up rather than having the top and then deciding individually underneath. But that's just a personal preference.
I might interject here. We said we were going to do work session for 30 minutes maximum.
we're
going
over.
on 40 minutes already. We want to
So
end now.
we'll put in there 15 years unless otherwise specified by council in the resolution, and you guys can mess with it the next time you see it. How's that sound? And then Justin will do his legal review as well.
and you'll send us out a list of all the.
Yes, I should have done that. I apologize. I will do that after. I'll do it tomorrow.
Okay.
Hey, Mel, you can always do a bottom and a top.
Yeah, true.
Yep.
Okay, let's begin with our regular session of the council meeting tonight then. Let's do roll call.
Olson,
Here.
Rice,
Here.
Dosher, McCardle,
Here.
Barrington,
Here.
Allen,
Here.
Sharks, Smith.
Here.
Okay, first thing is approval of the consent agenda. Items appearing on the consent agenda may be removed by a city council member for discussion at the beginning of the formal agenda items.
I'd like to remove line item F, please. The approval of taxi cab licenses.
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I'd like to remove
Oh,
line
okay.
F, the approval of taxi cab licenses.
I'd like to look at the sales tax collection. Anybody got any information on that?
First and second penny sales tax for the first month of the year was up 21.97% over the same period last year. And third penny was up 1.3% over the same period last year. But we've kind of looked at the numbers, and I think a lot of it maybe we didn't receive everything in December that we should have, based on how low the numbers were in December that we did receive.
And if you remember, when we were looking at those fourth quarter collections at, January when we reported on this, we estimated, the lowest point in the last 5 years. And if you remember, we collected 2.8 million, which that would have put us back. The last time we were that low was 2008. So I think, like Michelle said, that we probably just saw a delay in some of those taxes being sent directly to the city. It doesn't mean they weren't spent then. It just means this report tells you when the city offices actually received that revenue in. So it's possible we ended the end of last year better than what the receipts showed as of December 31st.
Good way to start the year then.
Yeah. Just don't want anyone to get overexcited.
But even so, 21.9% is, I mean,
Yep.
a huge amount. So even if you said that 10% of that is from December, you still have an 11.9% increase in January. Or
Yeah, we'll know more I think when you that's why we look at it not only quarterly and monthly and started to do those trends, just because it does fluctuate so much on a, month-to-month basis. I have not looked up the sales tax reports that comes out of Pier yet to see what the actual sales reports were as of December 31st. I will do that, and that will give you a much better picture too.
I just don't want no surprises down the road that the state sent us a bill.
Yeah, I've heard that's happened twice
We've had that
here.
before, haven't we, Mel?
like they paid us too much and then they took it.
Yeah.
It wasn't insubstantial either.
No. If you read all the fine print at the bottom of it tells you that.
It's noted on the bottom of the report.
Yeah. I have a question on the AirVenture Cup application. Is that like a good possibility, probable? We just got to apply and they're going to come, or we got to apply and they'll let us know?
They do that every 2 years.
Yeah, I think they usually come every other
Every
year.
other year.
Right, but they don't have to come here.
No, but if we approve it, they're coming.
Okay.
It's been since the last time they came here, but I remember when Mike explained it to me then, one year they try to find some place that's west of their destination, and one year they try to find somewhere that's east of their destination, so they kind of alternate. And Mitchell just happens to be the right distance, so.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar with the omission of item F, the Lyft drivers.
Second.
Any further discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, roll call.
Are you commenting on the lift?
Okay, sorry. You'll get your chance.
Roll call, yes.
Smith,
Aye.
Sharks.
Aye.
Allen.
Aye.
Barrington. McCardle.
Aye.
Rice. Olson.
Aye.
Motion carries. Citizen input. Yeah, let's discuss item F that you removed from the agenda, then start with that.
Okay, the reason I removed it was because I was concerned about the Mr. Novak's application. It says on his application that he's been convicted of a felony in 1992, and it's hard to read, but it has something to do with kidnapping and attempted murder. And I just don't think that that would be a character that maybe we should be having a license to pick people up and give them rides. So I would like to deny Joseph E. Novak's application for a taxi license.
I'll give a little bit of a background here. If you recall, the state legislature, I forget if it was last year or the year before, passed some laws dealing with these transportation network companies. I discussed those a little bit last time. As I said, they're mostly dealing with the insurance requirements and stuff like that. But one of the things that they did, and I'm trying to pull up the section here while I'm talking and not doing it fast enough, was they put in a requirement that the Lyft and the Uber companies have to do a criminal background check, and the things that they have to check for are under 32-40-4, and basically if you're looking at the types of crimes that would disallow you from being able to work for one of these companies are moving traffic violations within the preceding 3 years, or at least one involving reckless driving or driving on a suspended or revoked license within the last 3 years. People that can been convicted in the preceding 7 years of a felony. So they do, if you've been convicted of a felony within the last 7 years, you can't drive for Lyft or Uber or anything like that, but the state does put that time limit on there. And really under our ordinance, we've got no background check requirements, so I don't know that we can deny a license on the grounds of the criminal background.
Are you serious? Why do we have them come before us then if we can't deny one?
Well,
if it's a blanket, everyone can get one. I'm just telling you that I'm not going to put my name on a piece of paper that says I think this guy should be given rides to young women needing a ride home from the bar, or anyone else for that matter, if he was convicted. It'd be different if he was tried, or he had a suspended imposition of sentence or whatever. But this is a guy who was convicted. And I don't know what you guys think that says. It looks to me like aiding and advising, kidnapping, and attempted murder. I don't know exactly what that is. But I don't care if it's been 7 years or 27 years. I'm not comfortable giving my stamp of approval to this guy.
Well, the reason that we don't do background checks is because of me. Because when I first got on the council, we spent a significant amount of time judging individuals. And my argument was it's up to the company to screen their employees. And if we make it clear that it's up to the company to screen their employees, then we're out of the liability mix. My concern with Lyft is not that the drivers are going to do anything or they're going to provide poor service, but my concern with Lyft is all of these guys are doing it as a second job. And they're going to do it in the most lucrative hours, the bar hours. And that then is going to cut into the profits of the taxi cab companies, who we've heard don't make any profit during the day. And now grandma, who needs to run to the store but forgot to call Palace Transit 24 hours before, can't do it because now this taxi cab company doesn't operate during the day because it's not profitable and the Lyft guy's at work. You know, the other issue, I understand what you're saying, but you're talking about 26 years ago. And so at what point does an individual pay their debt to society and get to come back and do a job?
And I agree that there are jobs that he should be able to do, but I'm not sure this is one of them. I think that it would not be difficult to go through historical records and find a lot of people who committed a crime and then they were silent for many years and then came back and recommitted another crime. I'm not saying that this man is not employable. I think there are a lot of jobs that he was probably highly qualified for and he should be hired and whatever. But to say that he's going to be going out in late hours of the night and picking up potentially individuals, young women who are under the influence or who have been drinking, I cannot and I will not put my seal of approval on that.
Well, and I respect that position, but you're assuming that kidnapping and attempted murder was connected with some sort of sexual crime.
No, I'm absolutely not. No, I'm making no assumption of that. But the fact that he was convicted of that makes me say I don't trust the character of him enough to give him this job. If he wants to go out and plow snow or any other driving thing, but I am not going to say, yes, let's give this guy a license to, you know what, it was murder too, so it doesn't have to be young women. I could be equally concerned about a man who was equally under the influence that he gave a ride to, because apparently he attempted murder and they get in an altercation because the man's inebriated. I'm making it up. I know that I'm making this up, but I'm just saying, due to this application that we asked him for, I have to believe that there's a reason that we asked for this. If we didn't, then I would say why everybody can have a lift license. Because it's not going to make any difference what you put on this application. We're going to give you a license. And I can't do it. I just can't do it.
I understand your philosophy, and I'm not, here to try to convince you otherwise, but if that same conviction had happened within the last 7 years, then I think there would be grounds.
And let me just give you this as an example. Let's say that there was a person who was convicted of buying and selling drugs. And 27 years later, we decide to put him in charge of all the drug collections for the city or whatever, like oversee. All I know, and I'm just saying hypothetically speaking, but that could be a really challenging position for that person to be in. And so I will be voting no on this, and it's just based on, we obviously asked for this application based on the information that we've been giving. I'm not comfortable giving a lift license to someone who was convicted of kidnapping and attempted murder.
I'll just say one last thing. You realize that he could apply at a taxi cab company tomorrow, and we would have nothing to say about it.
For some reason, I feel like if he was working for a taxi cab company and driving their cars and reporting back to them directly and having them oversee, I'm thinking of the Streetman's operation where those vehicles come back to them at night. But this is someone who no one's telling him when he needs to show up at work, and it's a very loosely run operation.
Well, I guess I'm just playing devil's advocate here again, but if you're using the Lyft app, I mean, those things are GPS tracked throughout the entire course, so I think there's actually more oversight when you're using Lyft than there would be through a traditional taxi company.
I think this discussion is a little ironic because I think it's California where that Lyft driver has disappeared, and they assume that he, in fact, was kidnapped and murdered.
But I was in Europe this summer where they have outlawed Uber because there were so many young women, and I think it was primarily young women who were kidnapped and taken and sexually violated and whatnot. So I know that in European countries that have had this maybe even longer than we have, it did become a big problem, and it has been abolished. And I want to say it was in Ireland, but I can't be positive, but I think it was Ireland that they no longer have those services available.
And just on the procedure, if there's going to be different, I guess, levels or numbers of people voting one way as to one license, procedurally, maybe just vote on them individually.
Is there a motion to be made?
I think we did have
I'll-
one public comment if they still want to come up.
I was going to address a few things. Derek Davis. I am on the agenda to be approved for Lyft. I was going to make a comment of a few things. As far as having our service available during the day, I believe Robert Unruh, who is also on the list, plans on running during the day. And one big concern of mine is at 2 o'clock in the morning, I honestly do not believe at all that we have enough taxi cabs in this town. I think we could have 10 more at that time in the morning to actually have everybody covered. I honestly think that there is not enough at that time in the morning. And also, I think Lyft would be great for tourists and businessmen coming to our city. It's something they're familiar with, that they've used in their bigger cities, Minneapolis, Omaha, wherever, Sioux Falls even. I think it'll be great for them as well. And my vehicle, just to let you know about that, I have a 6-passenger vehicle, so I will be able to provide they call it the plus option, so more people versus the 4-passenger vehicle. And also, I just think that this is more professional, for professional people. And I believe that's all I have to say. If there's any. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that wants to speak on this issue?
Is Mr. Novak here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, would you want to come up and talk to us about this? And
Yep. I'll answer any question you got.
tell us your story.
My story is, I do not blame anybody else for me going where I went but myself. I spent 15 years in prison. The parole board decided I spent my time there and released me. I drove taxi for a year and a half in Sioux Falls without no problems. You can talk to any one of my parole officers I've had since I've got out, and that I am not a troublemaker. You will find out if you dig into my background in them 15 years that I was locked up, I did not cause no trouble. I do not change my attitude. I'm friendly to everybody. I went through all the processes. I don't know, like he said, how long do I got to pay for something?
And I appreciate that. I do wish that there was an opportunity for us to have a little more information on what has happened in the ensuing years since you were convicted. That would be beneficial to us, I think.
Okay.
But to have this at this point, and you know, maybe if we had a letter of recommendation from your parole officer or someone that said, you know what, I can highly recommend this man. He's a changed person. I do have to say, like when I look at this on a piece of paper,
Yeah.
Right?
I understand. I can see where you're
can
looking
see where
at.
I'm yeah. So, however, there's no one in this room that believes in redemption more than me. So I have to tell you that I am a person of conviction that knows that people can change and that people make mistakes and that they can come back and improve and be better than they ever were before whatever mistakes were made. So I believe that you probably are a perfect example of that. Okay. All I'm asking is that we have someone that can vouch for you, because based on just this, I have a lot of hesitation. Obviously, I've been a little outspoken. But
Sorry. Mr. Novak, do you have a job now?
Yes, I do.
What do you do now?
I work for CHS Agronomy Center. I spread fertilizer. I drive the big machines, and then I drive semi during the fall and winter.
And when you were in Sioux Falls, you drove taxi
I
full-time?
drove taxi for a year and a half, full-time, from 11 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning. I worked at a gas station, Cubby's, which brought me to Mitchell, was it 7 years ago, 2012.
And is it fair to say when you drove the taxi in Sioux Falls, you were completely unsupervised?
Yes.
Yeah.
I had no one, except for a radio.
And when you left your job, I think you said last time that the company went out of business?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Financially, she couldn't handle it. I called the company. It is called Black Taxi now. Somebody took it. They took over the phone number. I got offered a job on the spot if I wanted to move to Sioux Falls. Lyft, like he said, is your GPS. They can watch you from everywhere you go. The passenger can watch it wherever they go. As we come to them, as we leave, you get rated by the passenger for your response, up to a 5-star rating. I have driven 22 rides for Lyft. I got a perfect score from all of them. Like I said, he can vouch for me. I got family that works for the city. I got family that works for the police department who support me, but due to their jobs, they can't vouch for me, they said. I can't.
Is it fair to say, I'm not suggesting anything would happen, but assuming something happened, even to you, Lyft has a record of those rides.
Yes,
so
they
they
do.
would be able to say, well, gosh, he picked up Mel Olson at such and such a point, let him off at such and such a point.
Yep.
That's what I was going to say, that he's probably monitored, or Lyft drivers or Uber drivers are monitored probably way more than any kind of taxi cab driver is monitored, because it's all on GPS, on phones, on both ends, not just the customer or him, but also the company of Lyft or the company of Uber. So
I called 2 weeks afterwards for a cancellation. Why? And they've just pulled up my whole records. They got it. They keep it on file. They keep it on the computer. Every ride, why it was canceled, why, from time to time. So, I'm sorry you feel.
No, you know what? No, I'm so glad you're here tonight.
Yeah.
I really am.
I
have a suggestion. One of the things that I would like to suggest is that when people come to get an application for a taxi cab or whatever it is, that we give them room to write more than one page so that we have so little to go by.
Yeah.
I read this and I'm like, holy smokes. You can understand, right? You can
Yeah.
understand why that would be a concern. But had you been able to provide background information and be able to say, here's a letter of recommendation from my parole officer, and here are some other people that can vouch for me,
Yeah.
I would have said, no, this is a man who's changed and who's a different person
I've
than he
worked
was in
for the
1990.
CHS for 6 years now.
Yeah.
I've stayed there. I can get them to vouch for me too. I show up on time. I've had a perfect, work
Okay, well, you've
evaluation
changed
here.
my mind. I just want you to know.
Well, I
You've changed my
appreciate that, I will do anything to make, to prove myself, if I got to report to somebody, the people that I have ride really like me, I didn't let the prison change me. I was a decent person when I went in. I got rounded up into something. I didn't let them 15 years affect me. Because people I talk to when I get out they can't believe, I spent that kind of time there, because I didn't want the place to change me. I didn't want to turn into somebody that society hated. So, and I behaved in there for 15 years with one incident.
Well, I just want you to know that I am a big enough person to know when I was wrong and when I made a mistake. And so I will move to approve the 3 licenses for our
Second.
Lyft.
Mr. Novak, thank you for coming up and speaking to us. It took courage to come up here and tell your story.
Okay.
We appreciate hearing it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for listening to me and giving me the opportunity.
I just want to make one comment before we vote, and that is, I have this concern, but Steve and I were talking, you know, why are we approving these people? We don't approve, you know, who the taxi companies hire. And Steve made the point last time, I forget the businesses he mentioned, but, you know, gas stations, grocery stores, we don't regulate those. And I take that point. I still have the same concern, but, you know, I think it was Mr. Davis who said, well, we could use many more drivers. If we truly believe, and, you know, the council last time indicated they did, that we should not be in the business of regulating the number and types of businesses, why are we even looking at these people?
Any more discussion?
And that would hold for any taxi cab company,
Yeah, we don't-
because it's not Lyft or whatever,
Right.
because we are approving these as individual taxi cab company drivers and companies.
Right, and we don't approve
And-
the drivers for any other taxi
Right.
companies. No.
And I guess the reason for that difference is because Lyft hasn't come and actually applied to be an operator.
Is there a motion to be made?
They did.
Second?
Danny seconded.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Let me just say, if we do continue to have these applications come before us, I think there's got to be room for background information because, you know, how do you make a decision based on one piece of paper that may or may not contain some very damning evidence, and we have no information to.
Well,
So
we have had people submit additional information, just like Unruh did in the online, and you had one at the last meeting too. They have the ability to submit additional information with their license if they would like to.
But it sure doesn't say that on this anywhere. I know that they can, but I'm wondering if Mr. Novak, had it said, please provide any additional background information you deem necessary, he may or may not have thought, well, maybe this is something, since they're going to just have this one piece of paper, maybe I should give them a little more information about myself.
The online application does have a place where they can attach additional information, which is where this one came from. So if someone's doing it online, they're getting that.
We can look at adding that language to the paper application.
It would be easy to do, I think.
Okay, let's move on to citizens' input. If you need to address the mayor and members of the city council on an item that was not on the agenda, excluding personnel items, please come forward to the podium and state your name and your concern. Presentations are limited to 3 minutes. Items may be considered, but no action will be taken at this time. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to address the city council? If so, come forward.
I've got one quick thing. Jeff and I were talking, and he called me. My aunt died. That's why he called me, just for the paper. We're not having ex parte communications there. But we got to talking about the lake, and we didn't talk about this specifically, but a bug I want to put into the council's ear. You know, Kevin McCardle, people who are watching, he doesn't say very much, but boy, does he do work behind the scenes. And one of the things he emailed me was the number of storm sewers that drain directly into the lake. And I think one of the things, if we're going to, whatever we're going to do, sounds like maybe dredging the lake, but whatever we're going to do is going to cost a lot of money. But I think we need to consider banning phosphorus fertilizer in the city of Mitchell. And obviously not for this year, but roughly half of our problem is created by us, you know, the lake itself and runoff and things. And so if we're going to spend significant resources on the lake, then I think we're maybe going to have to make some sacrifices. So I think we need to, in this next 6 months or so, talk to James Valley and True Green and Mebius and anybody else who might have professional lawn services, and talk to Campbell Supply and the other outfits that maybe sell fertilizer, to see if there's there's some alternative. I realize it'd be very hard to enforce, but I'd hate to spend all this money and then run phosphorus into the lake again. So
I received that same, thank you very much, Kevin, for sending that out. One of the questions that I had was, where do other cities who don't have a lake have their storm sewers empty? Can anyone, like, do we have, certainly we must have other storm sewers that don't go into the lake, is that right? Are they just into a holding pond?
There's one just right north of me, there's two of them right north of me that have an
Right.
easement through the.
They're
property
always going to
there.
find their way to a
They go
waterway.
down to the fire still. There's two 24-inch ones. When it rains, I think that takes the whole Shopko area and heads east, and it's underground, and it's rapid. There's a lot of water coming out of there. But
And-
it's right just north of me, you could watch it. It's there, that's one of them, but there's.
And if you recall, on the southwest side of town, we just got done with a lawsuit for that area for the drainage that we were pouring through down to Kibbe, so.
All of the storm drainage at some point finds its way back to a natural waterway. That's
You know,
just the process that
if I might
follows.
interject here just for a minute, about a year and a half ago, maybe, we did pass a city ordinance about no phosphorus being used in fertilizer out at the homes on the lake. Within, I can't remember what it was, 500 feet, I think, from the lake, you could not use phosphorus fertilizer. And at that time, I did get on the telephone. I spent a fair amount of time calling, every business in town that sold fertilizer. And the only one that I could find in Mitchell and in Sioux Falls was some of these nurseries. They have phosphorus in their starter fertilizers, for new lawns. But if you go out to, and I did that also, I went out and I checked some of these bags of fertilizers in some of these stores, and it's that middle number on the bag that tells you what your phosphorus content or load is. And I'm sure you know that, Danny, and that middle number is 0 on all those bags that I found anyway at that time. So I don't know if you can even buy it unless you maybe go to a professional lawn care service. And I even checked with True Green, and they don't use it either, other than in starter fertilizers.
But if you do look at peat moss, you look at Miracle-Gro, it's got phosphorus. So you're not going to eliminate it all. What says that I can't go to my former business and dump it on my yard? You ain't going to know. Who's going to place it? I think that education to the public's better than nothing. I won't support a ban on phosphorus. I never have, and I never will.
But I think what Mel's bringing up is, like you just said, Danny, is awareness.
Yes.
That's part of the education that we probably need to start, and maybe a ban is going too far, but as we learn more about the lake, we need to relay all that information on to the citizens.
And you can go to Tennessee Valley Authority, you can go to Minnesota, they've got good reports of how they've done it with communities. There's all kinds of sources. They just had a South Dakota fertilizer convention and ag products convention in Sioux Falls. They're there. You can talk to the Department of Natural Water Resources that cover our area that get mandated usually from the EPA out of Denver. That's why I had to send in all of my reporting forms. So there is channels that they can give you. You might want to put it in your, get a nice clipping or something to put it in your water bill and give them something to wear. But banning, they ain't gonna happen.
If you want to find it bad enough, you're going to find it.
May I address
If you want to
the
find
council?
it bad enough, you're going to find it.
They can call me. I can get them a semi-load tomorrow. Not a problem.
Kevin's got something.
It's a very popular thing to try to ban phosphorus in communities. The education process is probably more valuable than banning phosphorus, because your soaps, people washing cars in driveways, create more phosphorus problems than the actual applications of fertilizer. Most park and recreation facilities, golf courses, and farmers are exempt from phosphorus because they're professionally trained to apply those products. One of the bigger problems that we have is not phosphorus in fertilizers, it's our phosphorus in our soils from erosion. Our soils in this region are extremely high in phosphorus. Once it's translocated from the fields or from erosion points, cut banks around the lake, that phosphorus then ends up in the lake and ends up being activated by organic matter, excuse me, at the bottom of the lake. I think that something that would be more effective would be lawn care seminars put on by the park department and local agronomists would probably be, there are actually university studies out there that are saying that phosphorus bans are actually ignoring science. There is a lot more to this issue than just, and Mel, I don't mean to put down, it's a knee-jerk reaction by a lot of communities, and it's still a good thing to do, but people are going to find the phosphorus because they need it for starter fertilizers, and small amounts applied to healthy turf within a day or two, a week at the most, is actually locked up in the soil chemically and not available for leaching or runoff. It quickly chemically bonds to your soil particles. So this is a really complicated issue, and a lot of people will be upset by just a blanket banning phosphorus. So I would like to be with the park department and anybody else we can put together to do lawn care seminars or educating our public about soaps and things like that that can cause problems for the lake. And the drainage that's going into the lake is definitely an issue. So.
And I think SDSU up at Brookings would be a big, big help on this to help educate with their plant science directors that they have.
Yeah, I'm not insisting on this. I'm just suggesting that to the public, it's not the city that's going to solve this problem. It's going to have to be everybody doing, even if you think it doesn't do much good, you know, a little of this and a little of that to have a long-term solution, because otherwise 20 years from now we'll be draining the lake again or doing something else.
We have to put a cork in the bottom of it so it's not too difficult.
Okay, anyone else have comments?
Mayor, I had something quick. Last Friday night, I got a telephone call from home, and it was a neighbor of mine, and he was referring to a letter that was sent to him referring to snow removal on bike path. And I guess I commented to him that I didn't know what he was talking about. So he said, well, let me just run the letter over to you. So he did. And included into the letter, it stated that to contact your city council person if you've got questions on this. And again, I convinced him finally that I was not aware of this letter, but I just got a simple request that anytime city council is mentioned in correspondence or in a letter, that to make sure that we're carbon copied on that letter. So I think it's a pretty simple request, but just out of courtesy, I would appreciate if that would happen in the future.
Point well taken, thank you.
I agree. I just feel like this was something that was sprung on us, and we had no idea that this was coming, and so we were ill prepared to address it with our constituents. And so I too would appreciate if no correspondence went out with our name on it that we're not aware of. Period.
Anything else? Okay, moving on into, I'll entertain a motion for the city council to recess and sit as a board of adjustment.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Action to set the date for Board of Adjustment hearing for March 5th, 2018. Valor Investment Properties, LLC, are requesting backyard variances of 10 feet instead of the 25 feet as required to accommodate the construction of a multifamily property. The property is legally described as Lot X-1 and Lot X-2, Square 19, a subdivision of portions of Lot X of Square 19. The north one half of vacated East K Avenue and the west one half of vacated South Lawler Street, all in Weaver Squares, City of Mitchell, South Dakota, 111 and 113 East Juniper Avenue. The said real property is zoned R4, High Density Residential District.
Set the date.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next is action to set the date for a Board of Adjustment hearing for March 5th, 2018. Roger and Tammy Hartley are requesting an oversized variance of 2,448 square feet versus 2,000 square feet for construction of an accessory garage. The property is legally described as lots 11, Block 18, Capitol Edition, City of Mitchell, Davidson County, South Dakota, 504 West 13th Avenue. The said real property is zoned R2, Single Family Residential District. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
I just have a question. Was that worded properly? They're requesting a variance of 2,448 square feet versus 2,000 square feet.
I think that's what they had before,
Right.
aren't they?
You mean,
On the
planning and
I thought
zoning?
it was 1440 and then it went up to
No.
2,000.
Basically, if he was building at a 2,000, he wouldn't need a building.
Right.
He'd need a variance.
Okay.
2,000 is the standard.
Yeah. It went up, didn't it?
Yeah. He's over what he's allowed.
Okay, next is the action to set the date for Board of Adjustment hearing for March 5th, 2018. Jeffrey and Mary Lanning are requesting a conditional use permit to construct an accessory building on a non-contiguous lot. The property is legally described as lots 1 through 4, Block 17, Indian Head Edition, City of Mitchell, Davidson County, South Dakota, 76 South Harmon. The said real property is zoned RL, Lake Residential District.
Set the date.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next is entertaining motion for the Board of Adjustment to adjourn and the City Council to reconvene in regular session.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next is action to award bid for recycled asphalt and concrete crushing, City Project Number 2018-9 to Intex Corporation.
Can
Okay.
you tell us a little more about, oh, sorry, I didn't see you coming up. Never mind.
Okay, on February 13th of 2018, there was 8 bids received for this. There was Dakota Constructors, which actually was a low bidder at $157,150. It was $4.49 a ton. They were actually a low bidder, but we are suggesting that you reject that bid and go with the Intex Corp of $164,150, and that's at $4.69 a ton. It's about $7,000 higher. This decision was ran through. We had a brief meeting with Justin, city attorney. The paperwork, proper paperwork for the low bidder was not complete. There was a non-collusion form in there, non-collusion of bidder form in there that was not filled out, and at Justin's suggestion, we are going to the second bidder. Those 2 bids were, from there, I think you guys got the sheets. Go 172,550, 182, 185, 190, 244, and 252,000. So yeah, the Intex Corp is $7,000 higher than Dakota Constructors. The only other option we would have is to rebid it.
Kevin, what was budgeted?
We got right around 200,000. We had 115,000 from last year, and I think Tim had another 85,000 put in for this year. So we have that $200,000. So we're still under budget by about $36,000 roughly.
Who had the bid last year?
Actually, last year was Dakota Constructors.
Justin, is the omission just a typo, or they left something out or didn't fill something in?
Yeah,
or-
there was an entire one-page form that they just didn't complete. So in my view, it wasn't something, clerical or something small like that, that we could waive
And it's not something new to our bid process that wouldn't,
Not that I'm aware of. You know, it's a standard form that they include in the packet, and for whatever reason, it didn't get completed.
And what is the purpose of the form?
I think,
That
Kevin, you
bid
said it was a
form was-
non-collusion form. You know, really, it's an acknowledgement that they're not,
That we're not cheating.
that the contractor themselves aren't cheating in doing their bid. And then they just didn't fill it out. Not saying that they
Right.
did collude or anything, but they just didn't fill out the form, and I don't think that that's something that we can waive.
I'll move to award the bid to Intex Corporation.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next is action to approve agreement number 82018-08, Axon Storage and Support Agreement.
Good evening. What we're just asking for this evening, last year, we submitted budget for the 2018 budget for the Axon fleet system for the patrol cars. We did receive budgeting for that. What we're asking at this point now is just so that we can sign off for the contract for the remaining 4 years after this year to pay for the storage, the maintenance, the handling of the videos. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything that you might have.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is action to approve agreement number 82018-09, Geotech for asbestos remediation for Jitters Building, city project number 2018-8.
This contract would be with Geotech. What would they would go in and they would survey the building, and they would take samples of all the asbestos materials that seem subject. They would send it into a lab, and then they have a list of asbestos remediation companies that we would send the information to. They would give us a quote to take care of the asbestos removal, and we would run that by you guys.
Terry, years ago when we did the one at, I think it was the Longhorn or
Yeah.
VFW, there was a grant we got from the state for asbestos on that building. Is there anything available?
There isn't. The only time there's a grant available is if a private property owner owns the building, but there is no grant for a city that already owns the building. We did
Terry,
some checking.
I have no problem with this, but how did the previous owner get away with not remediating it themselves?
I think
I
the
thought there was a law that
remediation-
said you had to do it.
From what I remember, the remediation comes in control when you try to demo the building.
It's
or do
only
it-
when you disturb it. We have asbestos tile in this facility here.
Okay.
Is there a lot in there, or we don't know?
There's pipe wrap, there's some ceiling tile, and there possibly is some floor tile. So their estimated amount, depending on how much material they got to test, is between 2,048 and 3,080. And it's the same company we've used for the Longhorn, the VFW, City Hall, Corn Palace.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next is action to approve agreement number 82018-10, purchase of new ambulance.
Good evening, Paul Morse, Assistant Chief Fire and EMS. This is a request for approval of purchase of an ambulance for the EMS division through Premier Specialty Vehicles. This is through the Savick Buying Group. We put together a bid spec committee, and they had to work pretty hard to scrimp, save, and cut some corners, and we did come in under what was budgeted from last year's budget request.
How often do we replace ambulances?
It kind of depends what the ambulance is currently used for. Right now, the ambulance that's going to be replaced is let me tell you. The ambulance we're replacing right now is a 2007 Ford ambulance. It's got 70,000 miles on it, which isn't a lot, but it's our first run-out ambulance. It's been all hard in-town road miles. It's not like it's been out highway miles. So this particular one we've had since obviously 2007, so 11 years. We try to get 10 years out of them if we can, but it just depends upon, maybe one time we get a lemon, sometimes they last forever. Right now, we've got an ambulance out there that's a 2008 It's our Medic 5. It's a van-style ambulance, and it's actually the ambulance I initially intended to replace, but it's running like a top. It's got 275,000 miles on it. And it's what we use to transport patients back and forth to Sioux Falls or Minneapolis or Omaha. Yeah.
When are we going to see in a TV commercial?
Pardon me?
When are we going to see in a TV commercial the ambulance is running 275,000 miles?
As soon as they offer to pay for part of the ambulance, then we'll probably look at that. Help budget that process.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Action to approve agreement number A2018-11, Jitters Building, Demo City Project number 2018-8 to Larry Jersa, architect.
This is a contract with Larry Jerza to come up with some plans to demo the Jitters Building at 512 North Main Street. So we could send it out for bids to hire a contractor to come in and demo the building. We sent it out. We sent requests for proposals to 2 architects in town, and Larry was the lowest.
And again, Terry, I have no problem with this, but is this putting the cart before the horse? Do we need to see what happens with the asbestos before we start?
Not really, because we just have the asbestos contract to remove all the asbestos materials before we could start doing demos. So this is a way to get things rolling. So once we get the asbestos out of there, then we could just start with the demo after that.
I may have missed this in there, Terry, but we're going to try to do this summer, do you think?
What Steph and I talked about a little bit was we would wait till probably fall, maybe early winter, just because of all the debris and everything around the downtown area. And then they're going to need to get access in the 5th and Main parking lot to get side dump trucks in there to load and unload. And we thought it'd be a good time to kind of stay. We'd probably do it like maybe after October, after the Wesleyan Homecoming Parade, and try to schedule sometime after that.
Because then we will also have access to the Northwestern Public Service parking lot, so we can use that in alternate of 5th and Main. And secondly, in conversations Terry had with a couple contractors, they anticipate the bids would be lower in the fall or winter than they would be trying to do it during the summer. So it'd be a cheaper route to go, I guess.
Motion to approve.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is action to approve agreement number A2018-12, Rec Center re-roof Phase 2, City Project number 2018-24 to Larry Jersa, architect.
And this is the same, this would be a contract with Larry Jerza to prepare plans so we could send it out for bidding. This would be to replace the final 3 sections of the roofing on the rec center roof. I believe one of these is just the felt. The other 2 have the felt with the rock on top of it. We replaced 2 sections of the roof last year, so this would be the final portions of the rec center roof that would be needed to be replaced.
And the rec center roof is in the capital budget for Park and Rec, and Terry did also do a request for proposals on this service as well, and this was the low quote received.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I just have one quick question. Are we going to do the same kind of thing on the roof?
We're going to do the same kind of, we'll remove the rock, put in all new styrofoam and felt. We will haul the rock off and we just use it for other things, but we'll do it the same process of what we did before.
When's that, this summer then?
We're we want to try to get this one bid right away so the contractor could be ready when it gets warm. We want to try to do it, let's see. I thought we wanted to do it this summer after school is out. But a majority of this work might be able to be done on the south side near where the pool area is, because a majority of that rock is on the south side of the building. So we'll take a look at that once we kind of get started with plans.
Is this the one that shows the pictures leaking?
This is one of the roofs that was recommended by that SCH.
It was on the SCH study that you guys reviewed back in 2015, but They did a section last year in lieu of some of the other items that were planned, just because they were having active leaking last year as well. I don't know if you're still having problems this year or active.
No, the leaking was related to the construction, and that's been
Okay.
mitigated.
The one thing that we've noticed with this ballast being on top of the felt, it really stretches that, that felt, that fabric, to where that rock really creates some issues right along the corners and around the fittings and stuff. So.
Motion carries. Next is second reading and adoption of ordinance number 2017-17, amending sidewalk, snow and ice removal ordinance.
I'll put it on second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Is there any public comment? I was told, Terry, that somebody was going to be here tonight.
Yep, I would like you to hear from, his name is Jay Pepple. He's with the area DOT office, and he was involved in this project. We got just a couple things we'd like to talk to you about. Jay?
Yeah, my name's Jay Pepple. I'm the DOT, the area engineer out at the Mitchell area office. And I guess I'm here because I just wanted to maybe give you guys the opportunity to ask a few questions to the DOT. I've heard a lot of rumors going around about how we got to the point with the sidewalks and whatever, and I just wanted to maybe clear the record a little bit on that, so to try to avoid that. We all know why sidewalks are important. They're important to get people off of our roadways so they're not walking up and down. I mean, we're doing that in the city. We're moving people from the street to forcing the landowners to put sidewalks on their deal. The DOT is no different. We are required on any reconstruction or any RSI project, which RSI is a roadway safety improvement project. Our Burr Street project qualifies for both. We use safety funds to promote that, so that throws us in that category. But since it's a total reconstruction, it also throws us in that category. What I mean by that category means that we have to provide access to pedestrians and bicycles. So when I say we have to provide access along that corridor for them, it also means that by law or ADA requirements, those types of things, we're required to provide reasonable access to businesses. So you can look at, I know it's been mentioned in the past, why do we have two sidewalks? Well, I think the other thing I might go back just a little bit and explain as to how we got to that how we got to this point. In September of 13, I was not here at the time, but we had a public meeting, talked about what we're going to do out there. On February of 15, we went to the landowners and we said this is what approximately it's going to look like. At that meeting in 15, it was presented to the landowners that there would be sidewalks on both sides of Burr Street, but not along the frontage road. So when you hear your businesses and people say that we didn't know about the sidewalks, in February of 15, they didn't. It wasn't shown on those plan sheets. In June of 15, we did our final design inspection. The city was involved in those. We drove around, we looked at the corridor and whatever. And as part of that final design inspection, our ADA people, which out of Pierre, our road design office, has people that's what they look at. They did not feel that we were providing adequate or reasonable access to the businesses. So basically what it meant is, okay, and I know Mel, you brought this up, why do we have to have two of them? Well, reasonable to them at that determination, and this is what these people do, is the ADA stuff. And as all of you know, ADA is not something that I like to deal with. It is a law. We have no choice in it. So we have to follow it. So when they say that reasonable and we aren't accommodating reasonable, so that's when in the final design inspection we went through and what is reasonable. So we looked at both options. We looked at, okay, let's run the sidewalk along Burr Street. Let's bring it up around the frontage road, and then let's bring it back. Well, that's not reasonable for the person that just wants to go through, because if I'm in a wheelchair, now I got to go 500 feet up, or I'm sorry, 150, 200 feet this way, then follow and then come back. So that's not reasonable for that individual. Okay, now let's go the other way. I want to get to Jimmy John's, for instance, and I'm along Burr Street there. Well, I don't have reasonable access to get up there because I have to jump on a road to get from Burr Street up to that point. So one could argue, okay, well, let's provide a sidewalk up that street. Well, now you kind of go back to then. Now I want to go down to Arby's or to the gas station, or I'm staying at the motel across, that's in the middle of that service road. So how do we provide reasonable access for that individual to get to that facility? Well, that's how the two sidewalks came about. The rumor I heard was, and a couple is, number one, from the landowners or the business owners, and they've told me this too, that how come I wasn't involved in that decision? Well, it's not, I hate to say it this way, but it's not their decision to make. This is a law that we have to follow. It's really not even the city's, Terry and his group gave his input, but in the end it was basically the decision of road design, the DOT, that this is what we consider reasonable, this is what you're going to have. So that's kind of how we got to what has been referred to the double sidewalks and various things, is to make that reasonable. I know some individuals have kind of come up to me and said, why do I have to maintain this and that? And, I kind of go by them and, I'm at the Comfort Inn or whatever there by Arby's, and I want to go get something to eat, and I want to go up and get a Jimmy John's sandwich. How do I get there? I got to walk down the road to get there. That's my point. We don't want those people walking down the road to get there. So when somebody comes to me and that individual and he's in a wheelchair and he's, or senior citizens, we're not just talking about people and handicapped people. We're talking about people that just like to walk, people that are elderly, those types of people, that we still have to accommodate those people also. So we're trying to provide access to reasonable access to those businesses so they don't have to walk down the street. So I guess as far as maintenance of that facility, who maintains, who cleans the sidewalks, whatever, I mean, the DOT cities, the ones I've dealt with, I'm from Winter, we had the same situation, not the same situation, but the city is responsible for maintenance. Now, if your guys' ordinance says one thing or else, I guess I'm out of that, but this is a standard agreement that the city is to maintain the sidewalk, and that's where we're there. So I guess mainly wanted to stop the rumors that, how come I wasn't, involved in that? How come it wasn't my decision? It really wasn't any of our decision. It was, what our DOT people considered, ADA DOT people considered reasonable access to this facility. So,
Appreciate you coming in.
thank you. Questions?
So it's good to see you again. I don't know if you remember me.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had a car accident. I ran into him, so.
Yeah. We'll work on that later.
Well, I didn't want to leave that awkward thing between us, so.
Did she have insurance?
I hope so.
It was my fault. I was cited, so anyway. No, but so the bottom line is what you said at the end is that the city was responsible for the maintenance. Is that correct?
Well, that is any agreement that we have with the city within the city limits. I mean, that's standard in Sioux Falls and anywhere. I mean, the state basically builds the facility, and then it's the city's, however we agreement, but it's just a standard agreement. Yes, the city does have to now. As far as if an ordinance trumps that to do whatever, I mean, I would say, I'm just talking on a whim here, and I shouldn't even be talking, but we have other facilities out there that the DOT built and paid for and transferred them over to the city. Now and the landowner, adjacent landowner, is maintaining those facilities. So really, this is no different than any other facility that you have within the city.
So that other facility that Jay is talking about is when we did the bypass from the interstate all the way around to tie it into North Main Street. There was new sidewalk that was put in from the DOT all the way to 3rd Street to the railroad tracks. New sidewalk was put in on the east side of the road, and all those property owners take care of those sidewalks. And we have a maintenance agreement, kind of like the same as what we have Burr Street. And how us and other cities have followed that agreement is if you have an ordinance in place like what we do, where adjacent property owners are responsible to maintain their sidewalk, that's how we handle the bypass, and that's how we've always handled Haven Street. And with talking to some other towns, that's how they handle the maintenance agreement and their ordinances that they have in place for situations like that.
On the bypass, though, those property owners aren't, their property line's not 40 feet away from the sidewalk.
No.
Yeah.
And they also don't have double sidewalks, which you, and I understand what you're saying, of which we do have to abide by ADA. But you talk to the normal person in town and they're saying, literally, within 25, 30 yards of each other, or feet, whatever it is, you've got 2 sidewalks going north and south on both sides of the interstate. And, you know, would one of them, well, I understand, you know, the way that you're approaching it. That was never been explained to us before. I don't know if it's been explained to the business owners or not either. But the unfortunate part is now when it was presented to the council for the first time, and it might have been on a map, and I probably missed it, but it was a road project, not a sidewalk project. So we're all focusing in on roads. And I think, Jay, you were here that day. It was in May, and we said, whoa, why 2 sidewalks? Let's cut this thing. There's no way. Let's change this. And you come up and said, well, you can do that, but you just shut this project down right now. And so the people that were affected come up and said, well, we know we can't do that, but let's have a discussion in the future about the maintenance of it. That's my recollection.
Yeah, and you're exactly right, Joe. And I think maybe I failed to explain that we had really no choice in this. I did some double checking just to make sure that I'm not giving you some bad information here. And that's what our road design people confirmed to me today. So that's why I felt it was very important for me to get that out there, that we're kind of stuck with it. At the time when we had talked there, you know, the project was already let, we're kind of all stuck with it, so, you know, it was just kind of, I guess I would just say it's a done deal, so let's just deal with it. I didn't really realize, to be honest with you, and probably all you guys too, that we'd still be talking about maintenance of a sidewalk, you know, 6 months later or whatever, a year later. But I just wanted to be here so you guys heard it from me, so we didn't have any more of these rumors. I did not realize all these rumors were kind of floating around about, you know, what day I was told of this and why I wasn't told of that and blah, blah, blah. And really, like I said, the landowners can say all they want, but they have no choice in it. To be honest with you, there is some obligation by the landowners even at this point to provide reasonable access into their facility. So we could take that a step further, you know, and I'll let them deal with that. But I'll give an example. Walgreens, for instance, if you go to the Walgreens corner there, they did a few years ago, we provide the sidewalk across here. There's a boulevard in between the sidewalk and Walgreens. They provided sidewalks to their facility with a crosswalk that goes across their parking lot into their front door. Now, if you really want to talk about accessibility and what should happen, that should happen at every business. And Walgreens paid for that and did that. So, you know, that's not my place to tell a business how to enter their facility, but that's a good example of what should happen if we really want to get serious with ADA and that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any more discussion or public comment? If not,
We didn't vote on actually putting it on second reading. Oh, that's right.
I was just going to say it. Not, is there a motion?
Well, we have a motion.
Okay. So if there's no further discussion, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, next is motion to approve. Request public comment.
Yeah, I'm going to move to adopt, but the other thing that I want to bring up. Okay, thank you. The other thing I want to bring up is the letter that I was referring to earlier is the city has been maintaining these bike paths and have basically, I don't know if you want to call it unwritten agreement or some discussion when this was put in. The very first bike path that was ever put in, the land was donated, and it was on North Olman. And this has been close to probably 15 years ago. And so I don't think in today's environment with our current ordinance, if it doesn't allow it, then I think we need to change the ordinance and exempt those areas that are listed in the 23rd Avenue and with Olman that's being affected by these residences. We can't turn back on these people when we've committed to this a long time ago. So I would like to have an addendum or an amendment to the current ordinance that would exempt those two areas and have it up for discussion. Maybe you guys don't want to do it, but at least I want to have a discussion.
So you're amending your motion that you?
No.
Okay.
Well,
no, this is
okay.
To approve this one, and then in the future,
Have a discussion.
yeah, I'd be game to talk about it in the future, but we've kind of kicked this can down the road. I'd like to.
That's right, not for this one.
Not for this, okay, because I have no idea what this letter says or anything else, so.
I'll let you guys know on that. We sent, or I think Terry sent that out
I didn't
last
about it until Jeff
Thursday or
sent the letter.
Friday.
I only read it, so it wasn't good.
Anyway, that went out last week or late last week, and we've been doing a little bit more research. At that time, we weren't in possession of any easement agreements or anything for those areas, which, again, these areas are a little bit weird because some portions of them are actually within the right-of-way and some are on private property pursuant to an easement agreement. Well, supposed to be an easement agreement. Problem is we couldn't find those easement agreements, and so we're continuing to look for those. We did find one that says that the city is responsible for maintenance, so I think that should take care of that. The question now is whether we're going to be able to find those agreements for the other spots that were included in that letter. So I think we'll probably be able to find out a little bit more information on that.
Give a little more time to do a little more research to see if
Right.
those agreements can be found first.
I just want to know what possessed whoever is behind this letter that went out to send it out without letting any of us know, without having any kind of a discussion. And anyone who has followed the discussion about the Burr Street project knows without any question what the intention was for the city council. And it was not that we were going to suddenly turn on a dime and make homeowners responsible for keeping bike paths clear. So whoever's brainchild that was, I have no idea who ultimately is behind it. I assume it's you, Mayor. I am strongly opposed to that. I cannot believe that it was done because that was never the intention of any single one of us sitting around this table.
I just think that communication is lacking here. Why didn't you go to the landowners and ask them? Why didn't you go to them and say, what happened to this years ago, and be upfront with them? They get a letter. I did get calls on this, and it didn't make me happy either. I think it was very lack of communication, and it comes to your office, Mayor. It's lack of communication. You need to keep us informed. You need to keep the people that you're going to prosecute, which is prosecute. You're going to take them. You're going to take them to the cleaners. You're going to do it. And I think it's not good business for the city of Mitchell to act this way.
I don't want to get into personalities. I'm just wondering, people have no expectation that the Hitchcock Pool is going to be open in the winter. It's a summer amenity. A bike path you know, it's supposed to be 9 below tonight. Who's riding the bike path? Why are we even keeping those open in the winter? I mean, to me, that's the fundamental question. Sidewalk's a different kind of deal, but a bike path, you know, I think.
People use them.
Yeah, they do.
Walk on.
Well, I think they're
Ride their bikes.
certifiable then if they're riding in this weather.
Maybe they need a lift.
I'm like looking right at Steve.
I know Steve probably uses it more than most, but I honestly do use them in the wintertime also.
Mel, to answer your question a little bit, the engineering department, specifically Tim McGannon, with parking lots and most of these bike paths are asphalt, and when the snow piles up and melts, the hydraulic pressure gets underneath the asphalt and lifts it during thaws, so you end up with a bunch of broken up bike paths if you don't remove the snow. And it's kind of a tough thing, but you hate to be out there doing it, but.
Kevin, I got to get out of this meeting. You made me look bad twice tonight.
I'm sorry.
I'm out, so.
And in some areas, those bike paths are also sidewalks. So on
Say I
Minnesota,
need
from
a
the
good kick.
bypass down to Cadwell, that's in front of people's houses. It's a sidewalk. Around DWU, that's also a sidewalk that's just wider for the bike path, and around Cabela's. And there are people that use the sidewalks year round. So, you know, and I'm not pointing fingers, and I'll take blame too that we should have given a copy to council. But the bottom line is, it's difficult for staff to be put into a position to try to have to pick and choose where to enforce an ordinance. And the only reason why these were even discovered was because we were trying to make sure that Burr was a singular situation in the city. So when it became known that there's other areas not being covered, you know, from a staff's perspective, we have to make sure that we're treating everybody the same and we're not doing anything differently. And without finding those easement agreements till today, I mean, that's when they really started showing up. You know, there was nothing documenting it. So if the council wants to have that exempted, you know, that's totally understandable, but I think we need a little bit more time for it to get through those records to see what's all in those easement agreements and make sure that that we have everything in place that we need. But also, you know, you have to provide a way to start that notification. I think Terry said there's 12 letters that went out.
14,
So
14, I think.
14, okay.
Which is fine. But what was the urgency that we could not have been brought on board? Because I'm guessing that historically speaking, there are people on this council who could have told you that there were easement agreements, that could have told you that there were reasons that the city was not. So I don't know what happened between our last meeting and this meeting that suddenly, in that 2-week period of time, these letters had to go out without having any discussion with us on what kind of agreements might have been made with those.
And I wouldn't say that it was suddenly. I know that this conversation's been happening ever since the Burr Street discussion started. And I think the premise is if you're looking at this ordinance now and it's been publicly discussed, let's make sure from a city's perspective we're doing everything consistently. And it's an oversight that council probably didn't get a copy of that letter, but also there's letters that go out on public nuisance enforcement all the time, on mowing enforcement, on other items that not necessarily are copied on. I wish I would have kept a digital or some kind of copy so I could have emailed it out too. So when I would have got a question on Friday, I would have had it in front of me too. I understand where you're coming from. I think the city is working on making sure that we're not even sure all of these have the proper documentation in place, but whatever is there needs to be done so that it's recorded. So we don't have to worry about who remembers on the council what was done in the past. Now we'll know because it'll be clearly spelled out for everybody.
I think it's my turn to say something right now. I mean, Susan, I think you made an innuendo or an insinuation that I'm doing something a little underhanded here by sending those letters out. Is that what your implication is?
I don't know that maybe, yeah, maybe.
Well, I'm going to
without talking to the council and putting our name on it.
Well,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
I'm going to say one thing here. First of all, I gave permission for those letters to go out. Because when the ordinance was adopted that you people are talking about tonight, and what that ordinance says is that anything outside of 40 feet, those property owners are not going to have to remove the snow on those walks. Anything within 40 feet, you are required to remove the snow if it's adjacent to your property. That's what the current ordinance says. That's what this new ordinance says. So it was brought to my attention that this is going to affect all these people on 23rd Avenue. It's going to affect all the people along Olman Street. We could not find anything in our records that indicated any easement agreements with anybody. The first inkling I got was I got a call from a gentleman last night. He said to me that he had an agreement with the city. It was a verbal agreement. I don't know how far back it went. I said, I didn't know nothing about it, but we would look into it, and I'll get back with you on it. But that was the reasons why the letters went out, because this ordinance almost mandated it. And for you to insinuate or implicate that I was doing something underhanded, I'm going to call that as a point of order. As a point of order, debate must be impersonal and must never be directed to any individual. It is never permissible to attack the motives, character, or personality of a member either directly or by innuendo or implication. And that's what you just did tonight.
Mayor, really? Are you really reading that to
I am
me?
really
You're the
reading it-
person, are you
I'm really
kidding
reading
me?
that
This
to
is
you.
so funny to me. Oh my gosh. Do you remember the meeting when you sat and made accusations and slandered me and my character? I can't believe that we're having this discussion, but
Are you talking about last February?
We've got a motion and a second,
Yeah.
and I'll call the question.
Is everybody in agreement with this calling of the question?
Yes.
Everybody's in agreement with that. Okay, question's been called. All those in favor, we had a motion. The roll call, that's what we need to do next, roll call.
Olson.
Aye.
Rice.
Aye.
McCardle.
Aye.
Barrington. Allen.
Aye.
Charks.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
I understand. Okay, next one is the second reading and adoption of ordinance number O2018-02, an ordinance amending section 7-8-3C of the Mitchell City Code regarding the riding of bicycles, skateboards, or online skates on sidewalks.
Move to put on second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Is there any public comment? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Discussion. Is there any public comment? Not, roll call.
Smith.
Aye.
Charks. Allen. Barrington. McCardle.
Aye.
Rice.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye. Okay, motion to adjourn.
Says-
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?